You're listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 173rd episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, alongside of me, co-host J-Raff.
Yeah, it's good to be back. We get to kind of talk about some of the things we didn't get to last week. I know it's going to be a big week for you. We jokingly said earlier, I said this is like your Oscars week.
Yeah, my wife and a couple of the other ladies in our group are big into the Oscar celebration, but they mostly want to judge people on the red carpet. But yeah, you in jest alluded to this being the week of my Oscars, and I pointed out that, well, my Oscars is more than just a 4 or 5 hour affair. My Oscars is actually 3 evenings, and technically when you get to day 3, that's a marathon. The first night is the sprint. Everyone's excited. It's the biggest night. You got 32 first-round picks in normal years, as long as the Patriots aren't cheating. We have 32 first-round picks. And, then you get to the second night, and, then there's still a lot of football fans paying attention. Rounds 2 and 3 are big. Usually those players can still have an impact in the first year, or their great depth the first year building into something. But then when you get to round 4 through 7 on Saturday, that's when you have the diehards come out. That's when you have people that, eat, breathe, sleep, everything football. And they're college fans, they're pro fans. They want to see what their team's doing. They want to see if their college players are making it. These are the guys that end up really can sometimes take your team over the top because they're going to be cheaper in terms of cost to the team, but also you're going to have them locked in. And, you might have still gotten a great player earlier, but if you find those great guys in the later rounds or even as an drafted guy, those are what happens and do wonders to your team. And some of the ones that have been great at that, like the Packers and Ravens, we've seen both those teams win championships in the last 5-6 years. So the rounds 4 through 7 and undrafted, while they don't grab the headlines and, the casual fan doesn't care, that's really where, championship teams are made.
Yeah, when we look at it, we'll, after the draft and all that, we'll talk about draft grades and all those things. And that's so tough because we're still grading them before they ever, set foot on the field for a game with these teams. That's why it's always interesting. And I know you look at these when you kind of look at kind of like the redrafts or the regrades of draft classes, after a season or 2 or 3, sometimes they'll go back and kind of regrade teams' drafts. That's always interesting because sometimes guys that, were kind of flying under the radar, have a bigger impact. Guys, turn out to be busts, all that stuff. Essentially, if you can get solid contributors, if you get a star early on, like that's fantastic. But as long as you just don't miss with like those first couple days or the first 2 days of those picks, you can be okay. But really, how I kind of judge it is I look, if my team, if they're okay with the first couple, like the first 2 days, if those guys, are contributing, you should have some starters there, all those things. But if your back end guys, the guys that got drafted Saturday, if they make the team, now again, obviously other factors can play into this, but that shows that you might have made some good hits there or some good picks in those late days where you got guys that are of some value to the team. So you like to see where those guys, I say that because the Eagles have, I say historically over the last 15 years or so, have had some guys, not just in the late rounds, who didn't make the team, when they were drafting them, like 4th or 5th round. That's a little frustrating because at that point you still would like to see those guys pan out. But, it'll be interesting to kind of see how it plays out. I think we saw it when free agency came about. This year was unlike many others in terms of the trades, the dealings that went on. And I think over the last few years we've seen some trades. The Redskins traded for RG3. And it's interesting when you look at what they had to give up to get RG3. And you look at some of these other teams that are looking to move now that aren't going to give anything close to that, even if they give what's considered high, a high price, nothing close to that. But this year seems to be like there's a lot of hype that there might be a lot of movement again in the days leading up to or on the days of the draft.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the movement, and I think that's a key point. I talked a couple weeks ago with Kyle Krabs from NDT Scouting about, is this a strong draft? And he pointed out, and I agreed with him, that while it's not, top heavy, it's a deep draft, especially at a few positions, but he only gave 15 first-round grades, which brings us back to your point about trading. That means that he felt, and I've seen other people mention this, that there's about 15 players that are truly worth a first-round pick, which means there should be teams wanting to get into the top 15 to land that guy, but then people who might be in the top be like, these top 15 guys don't fit our needs. We think we can get more by trading back.
Second-round guys
I want three,
in the second round.
Exactly. I want 2 or 3 second round and a third, whatever the mixture is. So that's why we think there could be a lot of movement, and some of that movement could be with the team that's kind of important to a lot of our listeners, being the Eagles. And it all comes back to Marcus Mariota. I talked to Kyle Krabs about that as well when we spoke 2 weeks ago. He would absolutely think that it would be a great get for the Eagles because Mariota was his top-ranked player. He's the guy that, if the team wants to go and get him, he'd be all for it. But then you talk about mortgaging the future. Is it worth giving up a bunch of picks, or, as we've heard recently now, players that are currently on your roster and, cemented in the NFL as already being able to perform? Is it worth getting rid of those guys to land this quarterback? And that's, it's a ton of what ifs, and it comes down to that all the time. Are we overestimating how much Chip Kelly wants to get Mariota? Because everyone just kind of makes this connection. Does he really want to do this?
But there's also been a lot of talk of, not a lot. There's been some talk of, man, he's got everyone. If he's not going to make a move for Mariota, he's got everyone in a perfect spot because everyone thinks he's going to.
Right.
Everyone thinks he's going to try and get him, and so someone else, if they want him, might overpay for him, or a team may take him and then not really want. It. No one really knows how it's going to work out, which is kind of interesting. It would be crazy if the Buccaneers took him. That would throw a wrench into everything. That would
definitely throw a wrench into everything. I don't know exactly if anyone expects that. Although I think before we move on or maybe address it a little bit more, I will show this picture that I sent out earlier. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see my tweet from earlier?
I did. Yeah.
So I sent this out on our Joe Mays and J-Raff Show Twitter page. And I'm going to pull it up for you here. And it might be a little bit hard to see. Hopefully you're watching us on Ustream. It's the best way to watch the show. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit and blow this up for you. This is a FanSpeak on-the-clock draft simulator that I was just toying with earlier today. I was using the Titans because I was working on my mock draft and just trying to get an idea. I'm not an expert on every team, so I was doing research on a bunch of team needs and a few prospects I wasn't as familiar with as I am with a few of the others. And I was choosing the Titans, and I was going to take Mariota too because that's what I was going with in my mock. Do I think the Titans are going to take him? Not necessarily, but I think a team's going to trade there to land him, be it the Titans just take him or be it the Browns, the Jets, the Eagles, the Rams. There could be a bunch of teams that could just, whatever, if the Rams aren't sold on Foles. But anyways, so I ran this, and the first wrench was thrown immediately at me when the Bucs took Mariota. So I was like, well, I'll just take Winston because I want them going 1-2, and I want to see how the draft plays out.
You want them to face off week 1?
Oh, and I do. And I actually want to do research into this. When was the last time 2 rookie quarterbacks started their careers against one another? So that's something I'm going to be doing. I'm using Pro Football Reference to try to land some of that data.
I'd seen you were doing some research this week.
I have been doing some research, yes. And there's a story behind everything, and we'll get to that eventually. But, I wanted to see Mariota Winston going 1-2, maybe how the draft would play out. And I pulled up a few teams just to see how they drafted, and I was like, oh, it's funny. It's Eagles landed Eric Kendricks, which is the brother of Michael Kendricks, who could be involved in a trade to get Mariota. And then I was like, okay, they went outside linebacker. Justin and I have talked about that too, that it's potential for them to do that with, Trent Cole being released, Connor Barwin having a stellar year. I think he's now being overrated. They re-signed Brandon Graham, but, he's always an injury issue. They have Marcus Smith from last year, but he was a big reach and didn't do anything this past season.
And just real quick, that's going to be a key factor for the Eagles. What are their thoughts on him? If they think he can contribute this year, all of a sudden you might have some flexibility that you didn't have before. But, yeah.
Then we got to the third round for the Eagles. They won with Tyler Lockett. Oh, okay, that's great. They needed a wide receiver. Awesome. So I started looking down, and I was like, oh, they took wait, what? They took 5 receivers in this draft. They only have, I think, 8 picks. 5 of them were wide receivers. Tyler Lockett from Kansas State, then 4 in a row at the end, 2 in round 5, round 6, round 7. Chris Conley, Kenny Bell, Darren Waller, and Ty Montgomery.
People will lose their minds.
Obviously, that's not going to happen. There's just a little glitch, I'm sure, in the fanspeak.com on the clock draft simulator. I've run these simulators through DraftTech's online mock draft simulator as well. But this one I just found funny. I sent it out on the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show Twitter page. I was like, was drafting for Titans. Notice this. Guess the Eagles really do need wide receivers, eh? That's a bold strategy, Cotton. So... I just thought it was interesting. It was a little funny development. But again, NFL draft this week. We're going to continue talking this show about the draft and some team needs and just a few things that could happen with squads that we didn't cover last week. We did Eagles, Cowboys, and Steelers last week. So tonight we're going to finish the AFC North with the Ravens and then jump to the AFC East and do the Dolphins and Patriots. So before we do that, let's get a little contact information out there. If there's anyone that would like to call us, email us, or get to us on social media, and Justin will have that information for you as soon as I pull it up for him.
Yeah, so we'd love to have your take on any of the things we talked about last week. We did talk about a couple of the teams that we know our listeners follow, and this week we'll have some more. So we'd love to have your take or questions. You can use the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline to call us at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also use the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. You can use either of those to get us those questions, and Joey will tell you how to get in touch with us on social media.
Yeah, we monitored our Facebook fan page and the Twitter account throughout the show. So if you'd like to comment, question us, ask us a question, pretty much anything. We're following our links on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook fan page, you can just search Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, and on Twitter, we're at Joe Mays and J-Raff. All right, so last week we went with a Star Wars theme, which I'm going to continue here. We're not going to watch the video again and waste a couple minutes of time, even though I think you should have all checked it out, because within the first day of it being out, 88 million people did. So hopefully you watched it by now. We are going to continue the Star Wars theme because I added it into the show last week and we didn't get to these three teams. So we're going to continue with the Star Wars-inspired NFL helmets. And first up this evening is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. We did their rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, last week to end the show. So this week we're going to start with them. Again,
and to be honest, for you, this Star Wars theme for the Ravens is absolutely perfect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My Geetos are a rogue planet in the Star Wars universe that probably very few people listening to the show, if any, have ever heard of except me. And the Siths, most people should recognize, are like the anti-Jedi. They're the evil people in the universe. So them being associated with the Ravens, I have no problem with whatsoever. All right, we're using fanspeak.com's On the Clock mock draft simulator. We're going to do 3 rounds like we did last week. We're going to use the On the Clock composite big boards, which takes like 8 big boards together, computes them to come up with kind of a consensus big board from some of the bigger sites, DraftTech being one of them that is utilized. And
by the way, after doing the show last week, I actually I did go on to Fanspeak and actually run a couple times on the Eagles just because I was like, this is so cool.
It is really cool.
I went through and ran a couple just to kind of get an idea of who might be there when the Eagles are picking, at least in those first 2 days.
Yeah, and we're going to do that. If we have time, though, we rarely ever do. We'll probably try to do an Eagles one again. But we're going to start here with the Ravens, and I'll pull it up for you so you can see and follow us along as we talk. The simulator is running. Now, the Ravens pick later in the draft because, as they usually are, they were very good last year. They're picking in the 20s here, so we're going to actually be in the late 20s.
Yeah,
we're going to pass the Eagles pick. Yeah. Dolphins went offensive tackle Clemmings from Pitt, which he just came out that he, I think, has an injury problem right now, so I think Clemmings is going to drop down the board.
Defensive tackle, Eric Armstead.
He would probably actually play defensive end for the Eagles in that alignment, but it makes sense. Armstead played where?
Did he?
He played at Oregon.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, so now we're at pick 26. That is where the Baltimore Ravens are picking in the first round, and we're not going to simulate any trades. So we're going to focus at sitting here, round 1, pick 26, and some of the players on the board. We see the disgruntled cornerback kicked off the Washington squad, and Marcus Peters. Todd Gurley is still available there from the University of Georgia.
And Melvin Gordon.
So is Gordon. Some of the wide receivers have been taken, but there's 3 good ones still on the board in Jalen Strong from Arizona State, Dorial Green Beckham from Missouri, and Brashad Perriman from Central Florida. If I'm the Ravens, probably those top three listed there are the first three that I would consider. Now they need cornerback help. They need a running back and they need a receiver. Right. Obviously, they lost their receiver to the 49ers this offseason.
I know. I think they just signed. Who was the cornerback they got from Colorado a few years ago? Who had
Jimmy Smith?
Who had off the field?
Oh, from Colorado?
I thought he was from Colorado. I could be messing that up, but they just re-signed one of their cornerbacks or one of their secondary guys.
Okay. Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yep.
But I don't know that they would go with Marcus Peters. Although they've shown a history of not necessarily shying away. But I think I like the Kevin Johnson pick. We've talked about that a little bit. But I honestly don't know. I think the fans would want them to go for a running back. I don't know that they do.
Well, Ozzie Newsome has been one of the better GMs
exactly.
The last decade plus here. They've done a very good job of finding gems, not only early in the draft, but also, as we mentioned at the top of the show, later in the draft and in the undrafted market. Honestly, if I'm drafting, I think they do because the hype around him. Right. I think they go Gurley.
I think they
really
do too. Because a lot of people say, despite the injury, and hasn't he had 2 ACL injuries?
That I don't know, but he was cleared medically last week and is good to go.
If you take the injury out of it, which I know you can or can't do depending on how you want to look at it, a lot of people have him as a top 10 talent, which is rare for a running back anymore. So to be able to get him at 26, I think you have to take him. I think I agree. He's dynamic enough, and that's something that they haven't had for a few years. Because even when Ray Rice was playing, he wasn't the Ray Rice that was the star running back. He hadn't been that for a few years.
Now, just to recap the first round, Jameis Winston went first overall. But Marcus Mariota fell 6th to the Jets.
Yeah, I haven't really seen him fall much further than the Jets, usually on here. But he has gone to that 6th.
There was a run on defensive linemen from the 49ers, Texans, and Chargers who go Goldman, Brown, Shelton. Kendricks went 1 pick before the Eagles, who then landed the Oregon defensive line prospect Eric Armstead. Not too many surprises there. A lot of defensive linemen, though.
Well, it's funny. Gurley went off the board, and then the Cowboys take Gordon
Melvin Gordon
next.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't want that to happen.
Oh man, Patriots took Jalen Strong. I don't want that to happen either. All right, let's move on.
We're gonna hope this one.
This isn't happening. This is just the Ravens picks. That's because we're gonna predict the Ravens picks here. All right, so Todd Gurley was our pick in the first round. Let's see how the board shake out. Now you heard us mention they need a receiver. They need defensive line help after trading Nata to the Lions. And we also need secondary, primarily cornerback help. So those are the areas that we're going to focus on here when our pick comes up in the second round, which should be here shortly, which is right now.
Yeah, so when we look at it,
we've got a running back in Tevin Coleman, who I like, but we just took Gurley.
And we just talked about this guy when we talked about the Eagles, Nelson Aguilar. And I think that would be a good pick for them. You have P.J. Williams sitting there. Some interesting, did he hurt himself with his DUI arrest?
Right.
Which he is fighting.
He's fighting. Yeah.
And, so to give him the benefit of the doubt, until that plays itself out, I'm not sure. This isn't to downplay the DUI. I don't know how much a DUI would affect a team's view on them.
And it's contested.
Right.
So what comes out Tuesday or Wednesday, the teams are going to get like the NFL research into these guys, like medical reports, background, everything the NFL has, they'll get. Now, the teams might already have it because they're going to do their own research, but the NFL gives the teams information on these guys. So we'll see how some of these stocks are affected, including P.J. Williams. The two that jump out to me, P.J. Williams is a good one, but I look at 2 receivers in Aguilar and Philip Dorsett, or the tight end Max Williams.
Yeah.
The Ravens lost Daniels to the Broncos.
Right.
They no longer have Pitta, I believe.
Well, Pitta is hoping to play this year, I think.
Well, we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah, he's been hurt a lot. So that tight end could definitely be a spot that you're looking for. And I guess that would all depend on their grades on the wide receivers. I think it'd be very hard, and this is personal preference, and you heard me talk about it last week.
it's hard to pass on Aguilar to me. I
agree.
really like Aguilar.
Because you're not going to get him after the second round.
No.
If he lasts this long, I'd kind of be a little surprised.
I have him going, and we should have gone over this already. Maybe we'll wait till the end, right before we sign off. I have my mock draft that we're going to look at, and Aguilar's in the first round for me.
Yeah, so if I can get him with one of the last picks of the second round, I take him.
Yeah, so
I don't think you can pass on him.
Or pick 26 of the second round. The second pick for the Ravens is going to be wide receiver Aguilar to go with Gurley. Now you've really added some playmakers to that offense.
Yeah,
which you need to surround Flacco with that.
Right.
If the Ravens want to
Flacco
go farther
has come
in the playoffs.
out and said that he thinks they're fine with the receivers they have. But what's he supposed to say?
Right, exactly. You're going to throw him under the bus.
Right. If he comes out and says, "Oh, we need receivers," two things are going to happen. One, his receivers that are there will be mad. And two, everybody's going to rip him for taking money that didn't allow him to sign receivers, which they wouldn't have necessarily spent on receivers anyway. But, nothing good can come if he's like, yeah, I think we need to draft the receiver.
Right.
So, they were going through there, and Dorsett was still there up until that last pick. I was like, oh, man. Not that they would take a second wide receiver in the third round, but, man.
All right, the guy that sticks out to me right here is Eric Rowe. I'm a fan of Eric Rowe. I'm not 100% confident he can stay at cornerback in the league. He could make a really strong free safety as well. If I'm drafting for the Dolphins, I take Rowe in a heartbeat because if he doesn't pan out a corner or you want to immediately change him to free safety, the Dolphins need that.
Right.
But for the Ravens, I'm not so sure that's the direction they'd want to go. If they're going to stick him at corner and leave him at corner, I think he's the pick, bar none. Other options, though, Anderson from Stanford would be a pick.
I kind of, and I've been back and forth. I don't know all that much, but Golson from Ole Miss has caught my attention just in a couple things that I've seen. Not that they would make him that pick over some others, but just, it's a possibility when they get to this point. It'll be interesting. I know, when we look at their things available here, I don't really see a tight end. Oh, there's one from
Heuerman.
Yeah,
from
I
Ohio
don't know
State.
that that's necessarily the route they're going to go at that point. Jesse James is available.
Jesse James, yeah.
I feel like they need secondary help. I know they have a lot of other things listed there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go offensive line. I know that's been an issue for them the last couple of years.
And Marpet would be a good pick. Some guy that doesn't necessarily have to start right away for them, but could develop down the road.
And a lot of people say, if you can give him 2 years, he could end up being
one of the best
players in the draft. So, and when you get to the third round, I think it's okay to make a pick like that. If you have a guy who is a potential, and there don't seem to be really questions about work ethic, or that's not why he ended up at he was Division III school, wasn't he?
He's the first player ever to play an East-West Shrine game from the D3.
It's not like he was in trouble and ended up there. He just wasn't.
And he was one of the best players there too, playing against these big school prospects.
I know that's not necessarily. I know they need help other places, but if you can get Ali Marpet at that late third round pick, I take him. I'd love for the Eagles to take him if they had the chance to get him in the third round. I think he would be a good fit because you've got some time to develop, but he could be a really big time
in the last 2 or 3 draft tech sims, the Dolphins have taken him in the second round.
Right, exactly. So again, if you can get him in the end of the third, kind of like their second round pick, with the Aguilar, if you can get him around after when some people think he's going to go, hey,
gold mine.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's make the pick. Ali Marpet, again, considered Eric Rowe. We mentioned Senquaz Golson, Ekpre Alomu, again, from Oregon, a possibility. I don't think they're going to double down on wide receiver. But another guy that was interesting to me, besides defensive tackle Anderson from Stanford, were the 2 down here, Gabe Wright from Auburn and Marcus Hardison from Arizona State. I think those are all defensive linemen that if the board plays out like this, that the Ravens would consider. But we're going to go with Ali Marpet. So we had first 3 picks all on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and in reality, I know it's kind of funny because they had their ups and downs. They had some turmoil there, all things considered last year, but they got things sorted out. But they had some issues defensively, last year, and we kind of stuck to the offensive side of the ball there. But I think if you add those guys, like I know we're kind of back and forth on Flacco a lot, but if you add some legitimate weapons, if none of those guys turn out to be superstars, but they're all solid contributors, that could be scary for the AFC North teams, because the Ravens made it the furthest out of the teams there last year with probably the least amount of weapons on offense.
You would think, the way the Steelers were developing
compared to the
at the end of
Steelers and compared to the Bengals. Bengals probably had the most weapons offensively.
Maybe not at quarterback. That's a
Fair
whole show
point,
right there,
fair
right?
point. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so to recap the Ravens, we went Todd Gurley round 1.
Which potential top 10 pick. Some people think he's still going to go top 10.
There's a possibility. I've seen
Right.
He's definitely been rising. Round 2, stole Nelson Aguilar, wide receiver from USC.
Who some people have as a first round
First
pick.
round. And in third, we went with Ali Marpet from Hobart, the guard, who it might take a year to develop him. But this is a Ravens pick again, and like I mentioned, a lot of sites have him going in the mid to late second or early round 3. Ravens got him at the end of round 3.
He's been a late riser too. He's come on really strong late. Not so much through the football season, but through a lot of the off-season stuff here. It's interesting. I think if they got those 3 guys with the way that all of them, their stock has been rising over the last month, I think, again, coming out of it, when we look at those draft grades that really aren't based on anything other than the grades of the individual players, once again, Ansi Newsom would be reigning king. Maybe not king, but like the Ravens would have a good draft grade if they got those 3 guys in the first 3 rounds.
All right. So that leaves us with the Ravens draft being finished.
Duh. Winning.
And we're gonna move on. We're gonna breeze through the Dolphins draft. I'm gonna probably run this because it's my team and I do it for Draft Tech. I just want to put it out there to have my thoughts on these guys and what they're gonna do, and then we're gonna spend the last 10 minutes on the Patriots. So here we are up to my Miami Dolphins. Again, 3 rounds, but actually the Dolphins only have 2 picks, so we're gonna do first and second round. I should have set that up properly because there's no reason to do a third round when Miami doesn't have a pick. So again, same way, we would be doing 3 rounds, 2 for the Dolphins without the third round pick, which was traded to the Saints in the Kenny Stills deal. Again, we're using fanspeak.com's On the Clock Mock Draft Simulator, a composite of all their big boards. And we're doing the Miami Dolphins, who pick 14th in the first round. The simulator is running. And, curveball, Marcus Mariota went first overall. And Jameis Winston didn't go till pick 6 to the Jets. So
Jameis Winston to the Jets. I would love to
match
see
made
that
in
happen.
heaven, right?
Oh my gosh, would that be awesome?
I'm going to pull this up for you, but this first pick will literally take a second because the guy I want is just sitting there for me to take. The guy I want the Dolphins to take. Now, obviously, without some of the big-name players dropping, because the Dolphins would crave Amari Cooper. The odds of him being available at 14 without trading into the top 10, maybe even the top
Unless
5.
something that no one is catching
no one knows
is
about.
coming out in that report on Tuesday, that's not going to happen.
The Dolphins, and I truly believe that Devontae Parker, again, barring any unforeseen things or a trade into the top 5, top 3, the Dolphins want Parker, and I want Parker. I think he's made for the West Coast style offense that Philbin and Bill Lazor are running with the Dolphins. I think he'd be a great addition for Ryan Tannehill with having Jarvis Landry, who's kind of the slot possession guy, who was incredible as a rookie last year. Kenny Stills, who will take the top off the defense. You have Greg Jennings now as the veteran there, who kind of can do it all and is an incredible guy off the field. Now you add Devontae Parker to that, where you already have Jordan Cameron and Lamar Miller.
It becomes even more of a make or break year for Tannehill.
It absolutely does. Him and Philbin.
But let's be honest, if you're gonna have a make or break year, you might as well have weapons, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like I said, Devontae Parker is the pick. I know Gregory's sitting there. We know his issues with drug testing. I just read a crazy article today on ESPN.com about the Warren Sapp draft 1995, which was linked to Kyle Brady, who the Jets fans wanted. Sapp were chanting Sapp. They went with Brady. It kind of threw everything into a mix,
right? And
it linked a couple squads together, including the Browns.
Because the Browns, Belichick were
wanted
going to take
Brady
at
They
10.
were going to take him.
And
the Browns traded out, got the heck out of there. And the rest is history. We know what happened to Warren Sapp and Kyle Brady, and it's just crazy. It was a really crazy article to read today. But Dolphins definitely taking Devontae Parker. Should he not be there, they would probably consider a cornerback like Waynes or Peters. A lot of people are saying if Gurley falls, Miami could add him to Lamar Miller. It's same thing, weapons for Tannehill in that offense. I I like Jalen Strong. I wouldn't be disappointed if they take him, but I think he's definitely an emergency break glass kind of guy.
Right. I've heard that some people have as many as 8 wide receivers going in the first round this year. Like it,
I think at least 5 are going to go. I do.
That's the exact breakdown I heard. They said they'd be shocked if 5 don't go. They said it could be up to 8.
Guaranteed. I think Cooper, White, Parker are guaranteed. They could go in the top 10, top 11. Those first 3.
Yeah.
But then you have incredible players like Jalen Cooper. Brashad Perriman's jumping up. His father, Brett Perriman, played at Miami. He's from Central Florida. I just got to see the U, by the way.
Oh.
Did you watch it?
Isn't it awesome?
It's awesome, but it doesn't make me like them.
No, but it's a great...
It makes me like when they showed Penn State beating them.
Right. Despite... we won't get into the ESPN issues here right now, but 30 for 30 is awesome.
Oh, 30 for 30 is incredible.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation with actually a number of different people over the last week. All started off of different 30 for 30s, which is kind of cool. But the U,
there's actually
the U part 2
right,
is great because the first game of that season, when they won the national championship, you know where they opened up? Kind of
Penn State.
At Penn State with the expansion when Adam Talaferro ran out of the tunnel. I went to that game and it was insane. And Penn State wasn't that good.
No.
But they
won.
weren't awful. And that Miami team, it was like watching someone on a completely different level.
Them.
They did. And Zach Mills ended up coming into the game and
Took
eventually
Seneca,
getting the spot. But just watching that game, when that team won the Super Bowl,
the national championship.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself in my story. When they won the championship, you thought, okay, that makes perfect sense. I saw this team; they were on a completely different level.
2000.
It reminded me of when we saw the Saints play, and we're like, that team's really good, and they
won the Super Bowl, right?
And won the Super Bowl.
Which I hope I'm doing this year, sitting at the Philadelphia Stadium to Link, watching the Dolphins play and being like, wow, this team's really good. So anyway, back to Miami. We're in the round 2. The last pick we're going to mock here because the Dolphins don't have the 3rd round pick. They took Parker at 14. There's people saying they could take Brashad Perriman at 14. Well, he's sitting here available at this juncture. He's a composite 33rd best player on the board. Obviously, they're not going to double down with receivers that they made.
Especially after they traded essentially their 3rd round pick for a receiver already. So that would essentially be receivers with their first 3 picks almost. So.
While Jalen Collins has been up into the mid-teens in the first round. He's available here in the mid-second round. There are some issues, and I think Miami's going to pass. I don't think they go with a hybrid Devin Funchess, although they do need a tight end. It would be interesting to have them add Max Williams to Jordan Cameron, Arthur Lynch, and Deion Sims. I think it's a bit of an overkill, though. If they hadn't signed Cameron, I think Max Williams I'd be all in on.
I think if you're going to draft a hybrid, put TJ Yeldon in at tight end. The way he wrecks people.
So the way the board's fallen here, Aguilar's there again, which, if I didn't take Parker, I would be all over him.
Yeah.
The Dolphins need help at guard, but Tomlinson's not exactly the best scheme fit. I don't think Miami needs too much help along defensive line, though they could add a guy to pair with Ndamukong Suh and Earl Mitchell to spell a player, but like someone like Carl Davis would be an interesting add for sure. But I think, again, like adding a wide receiver or a guard that doesn't fit the scheme would be a bit of overkill. I'm going to pass on Davis. So I think the way I'm leaning right now is more towards... Boy, it's a difficult choice. Boy. I think despite the issues that were brought up when the Ravens were drafting, I think I'm going to go P.J. Williams.
I think they do too.
And they added 2 veteran cornerbacks in Bryce McCain, who played for the Steelers last year, and now I'm not going to remember his name. He played for the Giants this past year. Wasn't there that long, though, but I'm going to forget his name. But the Dolphins added 2 cornerbacks in free agency. They need a guy to play opposite Brent Grimes, who's also 32, and they need to find a replacement for. They drafted Jamar Taylor and Will Davis. This will be their 3rd season coming up. So they're putting a lot on these guys that haven't done too much in the league or also maybe out of position. In that Bryce McCain is a good guy to put in the slot, take over for maybe Jimmy Smith, who the Dolphins lost. But they need a number 2. I think P.J. Williams can be that guy. He might be a little too physical and might be a little prone to flags early in his career. And obviously we saw those red flags with the potential DUI, although, like we mentioned, he's fighting that and there could be some issues there. But I think if the board falls that way, you had wide receiver Parker in the first round and cornerback P.J. Williams in the second. I think the Dolphins address two big needs. They don't have a third-round pick, but then there's plenty of options in the 4th through 6th rounds. They don't have a 7th-round pick either, but 2 in the 5th. To add, depth at defensive tackle and to find a guard, which are the two big other things they need, in addition to free safety. But as I mentioned with Kyle last week and 2 weeks ago on you last week, the safety class is not great. One of the guys I think they should look at if he's available is Demorius Allen from Arizona State. He's really rising. If he's available at pick 47, Miami could consider him there as well.
Yeah, and, like you said, they addressed their needs there. Or some of their needs. They get a weapon for Tannehill, and they get a guy to help try and slow down Tom Brady. That's basically, what it comes down to. So, I think, if P.J. Williams turns out, if he can get, obviously past the DUI thing, but if he can also manage to, because I've heard that issue about they're worried that he's so physical. Is he going to be able to play? Not that style, but is he going to be able to adjust to the style he needs to play in the NFL? Because you don't want him to be not physical at all, but you can't be getting flagged every time they snap the ball either. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Now, I'm already running the Patriots sim because we're running behind again, but the New England Patriots are up next for those watching us from Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, and the plethora of states up there that favor the New England team. Let's see. I just want to recap here. Winston went first in this draft with Mariota going 6. So the quarterbacks are going into the first 6 picks. That's pretty much guaranteed. The interesting thing I noticed was Amari Cooper was the 3rd wide receiver taken, but all were taken by pick 11. Miami went with a guy who I really don't see them taking, in Alvin Dupree, who's a hybrid player. They have that enough already in Deion Jordan, who they're looking to probably get rid of. Maybe for Brandon Boykin and some picks from the Eagles.
I don't want that. If anything, here's the thing, and I understand, but when they're going to be getting rid of players, they don't want Deion Jordan. So I don't want to give up picks for Deion Jordan. You know what I mean? I understand the value could still be there, but
maybe they do Deion Jordan for Brandon Boykin straight up.
That kills me, but if they're not going to give Brandon Boykin the chance to play, then at least get somebody who you are going to give a chance to play.
Miami gets rid of a piece that isn't working out. They get in a cornerback that they no longer have to draft a guy. It could work out in the long run. We'll find out. That probably will go down Thursday at some point, either before the draft, during the draft, right after the first round. All right, the Eagles took Marcus Peters in this Patriots sim that started a run on cornerbacks. We see Todd Gurley go to the Cardinals at 24. The Ravens took the tight end Max Williams at 26. And we're up with the last pick in the first round, which means the Super Bowl champs are on the clock. Here we are with the New England Patriots at 22. They've got a couple of great options in a few wide receivers that I'd be interested in. Cornerback, including a local guy in Byron Jones. I was
going to say, you got the guy right there in Connecticut, Byron Jones. You also have Kevin Johnson from Wake Forest. There could be some interest there. They would have their choice of guys there. I don't know.
If I'm the Patriots and this is the way it shakes out, and let me pull it up for everyone watching to see, I probably either go Strong or Johnson would be my top 2 for them. I could see them needing running back help, but I don't know
think there's any way they take a first-round running back.
No, Lawrence Maroney just didn't work out.
The way they just pick up literally anyone and throw them in at running back, why would they take a running back at 1?
So I think Strong or Johnson are the top 2 with a runner-up to maybe Green Beckham and Jones. Perriman could be thrown into that conversation as well, but those are the ones I'm focused on. So if you had to pick between the wide receiver, add help for Brady, or add defensive help with Kevin Johnson, who would you lean towards?
I take Kevin Johnson.
You'd go with Kevin Johnson, and I think that's the way that I probably would end up going because it's a deeper wide receiver draft, in my opinion, than cornerback. So
and they've already shown the ability to not throw anyone in there, but if Gronk's healthy, they can pretty much put whoever they want out there at wide receiver. And it is a deeper wide receiver draft.
So, hey, maybe something crazy like Nelson Aguilar, or he was probably already... No, there he is down there. Yep. Let's see if he makes it to the 64th pick. How crazy would that be?
Not crazy. Not crazy.
Yeah, we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen. But it's working to that point. Because if he's there, we're taking him. Like, there's no...
It's going to be close.
Oh
my gosh,
he's there. So here we are, pick 46 with the Patriots in the second round, the last pick of the second round.
Dorsett there.
Philip Dorsett is also there, but overall, Nelson Aguilar, I think, if I remember correctly, when we talked with Kyle Krabs 2 weeks ago, Aguilar, I think, was a top 20 player to him. Hey. And fringe first round guy, fringe. He'll be taking the first round to him in this draft. He wasn't one of the top 15, I don't believe, but he was right outside of it. So Aguilar is one of his favorite players. We have him a lot here in this round. I don't see why. It's hard for me to believe that he's ranked 46. But again, we're at pick 64. This is immense value. Do you have any argument against taking Aguilar there?
You have to take I could see them taking Dorsett if they have a higher grade or what they're looking for is there. But the way we've been grading the players, the way we've been talking about them, we've taken him before that every time we've had the chance to. So if he makes it that far, we have to
absolutely.
take him.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Now, they also need defensive line help. They could both use a tackle and end, especially with Vince Wilfork leaving. So we'll see how that plays out if someone like that drops.
Where did he end up? Or did he retire?
Houston.
Oh, my gosh. That's right.
Next to J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
All right, so I think we're up here now. I think this is about the 96th pick overall. Kevin Johnson, cornerback, Wake Forest, round 1. Wide receiver, Nelson Aguilar, USC, round 2. Here we are in round 3. Who's it going to be? Now, this is where you start to consider maybe a running back. David Cobb from Minnesota is available. Mike Davis from South Carolina. Don't think they're going to double down on wide receiver or cornerback for that matter. There's a couple offensive line prospects out there in Trey Jackson, BJ Finney, and Rob Havenstein.
I mean, yeah, and those Wisconsin offensive linemen, like it seems like you can't go wrong sometimes when you pick the Wisconsin offensive linemen.
And when I was working
Donovan Smith is there.
When I was working on the Titans mock earlier where the Eagles took 5 wide receivers or whatever, I actually saw now I forget what I was going to say, I saw. Right. So that's great. Awesome. So we're just going to move on. Patriots, I mentioned all these players that they could consider in offensive line, but I'm looking defensive line because I think that's what they need. And I'm a big fan of Marcus Hardison from Arizona State. So if he's there, I think he's the pick. There's also Amos available. Again, they've got ammo and the ability to find a gem at a running back later. So I think they favor the defensive line, upgrading that. So I would go with Marcus Hardison there.
Yeah. Also interesting that just kind of note that they still have Bryce Petty still available here at the end of the third round. I'm not saying he should go before that, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did.
Yeah, he's the 104th rated player in this composite big board, which means he'd be a late third, early fourth pick.
And I would agree with that. I just think sometimes, people can, especially once you get to the third round, people are willing to make those jumps now that they weren't maybe willing to make in the first or second round.
All right, so that is our New England.
Not that they'd be taking a quarterback because they have
they have Garoppolo, who they think is the future. So that's our New England Patriots mock draft. We went with the first round, Kevin Johnson, the cornerback. Round 2, Nelson Aguilar, the wide receiver. Round 3, Marcus Hardison, the defensive tackle. All Phil's needs, all got incredible value, I believe, at the juncture that they were selected. I don't think anyone would be disappointed with that pick, although if anyone is watching from New England, which I'm not sure they are, I think they're on a cruise as we speak. Hopefully they watch this in the archive and let me know what they think. And maybe this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if they hear them take one of these guys, they can say, hey, I heard it first on the Joe Mays and J-Raff show.
That's right.
All right. So, we've enjoyed talking about the draft. Really, the last 3 shows now. I was on with Kyle 2 weeks ago. Last week, we started this process. Today, we're finishing it. There isn't going to be a show next week. We both have some things going on, take a break, and I'm going to be busy with the draft, so we're just going to take the week off. We will be back on Mother's Day, which I'm sure our wives are happy about. But we're going to do one of our best of series shows, and we're going to talk best female athletes of all time. Just kind of tie it into the day, the celebration of mothers out there. And we'll just talk a little bit about who are some of the greatest female athletes, in a variety of sports. I'm sure tennis and track and field, I'm definitely going to make it a debut on this show, and quite possible boxing. And I'm sure there'll be some lady basketball as well, because we know that there's plenty of people that I love and hate from the world of women's basketball.
Yeah, so definitely a new topic. We've revisited some of our best ofs that we've done in the past, but this is definitely a new one for us. So tune in 2 weeks for that.
So I think that's everything. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Raff?
With us being off next week,
yes, some shout-outs.
Happy birthday to my mom.
Yes.
Next Sunday, actually.
Yeah, next Sunday is your mom's birthday, so happy early birthday to her. And also, friend of the show, Chad Henney, his wife, Brittany, is going to be having a birthday while we're on hiatus for technically the next 2 weeks. So happy birthday to her as well. But I think that's everything. So thanks for joining us. That wraps up the 173rd episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday evening at 6:30 for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.